When was Germany the strongest?
Ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe. Pour la France! En avant!
As a country, in contrast to the majority of Western European nations, Germany did not participate in the Age of Discovery, which took place between the 16th and 17th centuries, nor did it build colonies, trading posts, or a trading fleet during the ensuing period of colonialism. Germany was a part of the Holy Roman Empire, which lacked a strong, centralized leadership. Germany's society consequently stagnated as a result of its economy having little influence over global markets and resources, while in France, Britain, and the Netherlands, global trade and colonial possessions greatly boosted the power of mercantile and industrial groups and ushered in the bourgeoisie, who were able to take advantage of the newfound opportunities for economic growth. However, this whole narrative changed after the First World War, when the political leader changed and there was a process of rebuilding the German economy. But before we go down this road, let's take a look at how Germany's economy was before the First World War. By 1914, Germany had been a unified nation for under 50 years. Prior to 1871, it was merely a collection of 25 German-speaking duchies, city-states, and independent states, bordered by the North Sea, France, and Russia. German nationalists used race, culture, language, and power as uniting points. They envisioned a united Germany, its citizens full of pride in their country, its government run by strong, capable leaders, and its economy at the forefront of global technology. Germany's industrialization accelerated in the latter part of the 1800s. Modern industries like manufacturing, including electrical products from Siemens and AEG, chemicals, and motor construction, headed by people like Carl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler, have supplanted heavy industries and agricultural produce. The industrial boom led to significant demographic shifts. By 1910, 60% of Germans lived in cities. Between 1875 and 1910, Berlin's population doubled, and cities like Munich, Essen, and Kiel saw rapid growth. By 1910, Germany had 48 towns with populations over 100,000, up from just 8 in 1871. German exports tripled between 1890 and 1913, and the country surpassed Britain with a 14.8% global manufacturing production share by that year. By 1913, the world steel market was dominated by American and German exports, with Britain falling to third position. Germany produced 17.6 million tons of steel in 1914, more than all of Britain, France, and Russia combined. In 1914, Germany produced 277 million tons of coal, significantly more than Austria-Hungary's 47 million tons, France's 40 million tons, and Russia's 36 million tons combined. This was not far behind Britain's 292 million tons. German businesses relied on trade groups rather than brutal competition in the iron and steel, machinery, and other industries. The government's encouragement, the strong bureaucratic tradition, and the general corporatist mentality made Germany a global leader. Small businesses were able to operate under the shadow of much larger ones because of these alliances, which controlled competition. German trade unions have a long history dating back to the 1848 German Revolution and continue to be vital to the country's economy and society. One of the largest political parties in Germany, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, SPD, encouraged the creation of unions in 1875. Prior to 1850, Germany trailed behind the industrial development leaders, Belgium, France, and the United Kingdom. Nonetheless, the nation possessed a number of valuable resources, including a highly trained labor force, an excellent educational system, a strong work ethic, good living standards, and a sensible protectionist policy founded on the Zollverein. The German states began to catch up by the middle of the century, and by 1900, together with the United States and Britain, Germany was leading the globe in industrialization. Germany's societal structure in 1800 was not well adapted to economic or social progress. 1. 1914–1918. For the sake of the war effort, it quickly mobilized its civilian economy. Due to supply disruptions caused by the British blockade, the economy suffered. The demands of an extended all-out war placed a great deal of strain on Germany's economy. The nation's industrial and agricultural sectors suffered greatly as a result of the necessity to provide the military with food, ammunition, guns, and other requirements. Germany was severely limited in its capacity to import raw resources and food due to the Allied naval blockade. Due to shortages of necessities, there was a sharp drop in living standards and inflation as a result. The blockade had a slow effect, with German industry suffering little over the first few years. At the start of the war, mobilization and arming produced a brief but severe economic shock when unemployment rose from 2.7% in July 1914 to 22.7% in September. Following that, there was a sharp decline in unemployment as the war industry and recruitment created a huge need for labor. Because it was expected that the war would end quickly, government economic intervention was also initially modest. The unquenchable need for labor prompted yet another round of government involvement and a large shift in the labor force from peacetime industries to the military and war industries. Due to the threat posed by high rates of conscription into the army to the weapons sector, the German government started releasing a substantial number of otherwise eligible men from military service in 1916, allowing them to continue working. Overall, there was only a 10% decline in Germany's industrial workforce, demonstrating the effective handling of the conscription and industry balance. 740,000 of the 1.2 million men who were exempt from service in 1916 were deemed fit to serve. By 1918, 2.2 million men had been exempt from duty, with 1.3 million of them still eligible to serve. Workers from agriculture and peacetime industries migrated in droves to the higher-paying war industries, which by 1918 accounted for 45% of the labor force. As a result, over the duration of the conflict, the peacetime industry shrank by almost 43%, employing just 20% of the labor force by 1918. Germany's neutral neighbors, the Netherlands and the Scandinavian countries, sold essential supplies like wheat to keep the German population nourished, while it used its own natural resources and those of its conquered regions to cover the import deficit imposed by the British blockade. Certain goods, like cotton, rubber, and nitrates, were considered contraband by the Allies. Thus, Germany was unable to obtain them from its neutral trading partners and could not simply replace them from inside. Germany's agricultural industry suffered greatly as a result of the loss of nitrate imports, which were essential for making fertilizer and explosives. German chemical companies began manufacturing synthetic nitrates, but their output was barely sufficient to keep the explosives sector afloat. The productivity of agriculture fell sharply without fertilizer. The icy turnip winter of 1916–17 exacerbated the already dire situation of the German people's sustenance. After the failure of the wheat and potato crops, turnips, a vegetable that was previously utilized as animal feed, became their only source of food. The First World War had a catastrophic overall effect on the German economy. During the war, the German economy declined by almost 1/3, while the country's total industrial production fell by 40% from pre-war levels. But then, you will ask the question, how did Germany surface in the First World War? Let's go ahead to discover some military history. How did Germany surface in the First World War? On July 28, 1914, the First World War, commonly referred to as World War I, broke out. The war began on June 28, 1914, when Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo. Following the murder, Serbia was given a severe ultimatum by Austria-Hungary. Serbia complied with most of the requests, but not all of them, and on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The intricate network of alliances that existed at the time caused the conflict to grow rapidly. Serbia was aligned with Russia, whereas Austria-Hungary was with Germany. Russia gathered forces to back Serbia when Austria-Hungary declared war on it. Through the dual alliance, Germany and Austria-Hungary were allies. Germany saw Russia's mobilization as a threat, and on August 1, 1914, declared war on the country. Like the people of other European nations, the German people reacted to the start of the war in 1914 with a complicated range of emotions. Ideas of a shared fervor known as the spirit of 1914 have been called into question by more recent research. The Junkers, who controlled the German government, regarded the war as a means of putting an end to the hostile powers that surrounded France, Russia, and Britain. Additionally, Germany had a war plan, the Schlieffen Plan, that called for swiftly defeating Russia's ally France by crossing Belgium, which was neutral. Because of agreements preserving Belgium's neutrality, Germany's invasion of that country drew Britain into the conflict. Thus, on August 4, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. France was dragged into the war as well, having already mobilized as a result of its relationship with Russia. As more nations joined the fight that were obligated by treaties and alliances, the battle swiftly got worse. The Allied powers, mostly France, Russia, Britain, and subsequently Italy, the United States, and Japan, among others, were opposed by the Central Powers, mainly Germany, Austria-Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. Germany suffered a great deal and had extensive economic effects from World War I. Significant immediate economic strain resulted from the war, which also created political unrest and hyperinflation in the early 1920s. Furthermore, the war laid the groundwork for the Great Depression's economic hardships and the eventual establishment of the Nazi government. Germany was clearly unprepared for a war that would continue longer than a few months. Little was initially done to stabilize the economy for a wartime basis, and the German war economy would remain ill-organized for the duration of the conflict. The British blockade of Germany prevented food and raw material imports, which were essential to Germany's economy. Rationing was implemented after food prices were first restricted. 5 million pigs were slaughtered in 1915 in what was then called Germany in order to create food and preserve grain. The 1916-17 winter was dubbed the turnip winter because there was a low potato harvest and people were eating animal products, particularly turnips, which had an awful taste. Between August 1914 and mid-1919, an excess of 474,000 people died as a result of disease, exhaustion, and starvation, as opposed to fewer deaths during peacetime. Germany had no plans for mobilizing its civilian economy for the war effort, and no stockpiles of food or critical supplies had been made. Germany had to improvise rapidly. All major political sectors initially supported the war, including the socialists. Due to this lack of preparedness, they faced a decline in the economy of the country. Rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, also known as the Nazi Party, was led by the charismatic orator and propagandist Adolf Hitler in 1921. Restoring Germany's pride in its heritage, rejecting the Treaty of Versailles, and rebuilding the economy were among his pledges. Extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, anti-communism, and the notion of Aryan racial superiority were the tenets of the Nazi Party's program. A large number of people who were disappointed with the way things were going found hope in Hitler's vision of a powerful, unified Germany. Germany experienced the economic consequences of the Great Depression at the same time as many other countries, with a sharp increase in unemployment following the war crash in the country. Following his election to the German chancellorship in 1933, Adolf Hitler implemented economic improvement measures. Tariffs on imports, the privatization of state-owned businesses, and efforts to attain national economic self-sufficiency were among the reforms. In real terms, weekly earnings climbed by 19% between 1933 and 1939. although this was mostly because workers put in more hours. Hourly wage rates stayed relatively close to the lowest points of the Great Depression. Leading German corporate interests formed an alliance with the Nazi administration, supporting the regime's objectives and the war effort in return for favorable contracts, financial aid, and the repression of trade union activity. Even though small company owners had given the Nazis a lot of electoral support, cartels and monopolies were promoted at the expense of small firms. After World War II, Nazi Germany continued to have a large supply of slave labor, made mainly of convicts and inmates of concentration camps. Approximately 5 million individuals were forced into slavery in Poland alone throughout the conflict. Leading German companies, including as Thyssen, Krupp, IG Farben, Bosch, Blaupunkt, Daimler-Benz, Demag, Henschel, Junkers, Messerschmitt, Siemens, Volkswagen, and the Dutch company Philips employed hundreds of thousands of slave laborers in the seized areas. By 1944, 1/4 of all civilian workers in Germany were slaves, and most German factories employed a prisoner or two. The recovery to Germany becoming a strong nation came into place when the Nazis came to power. At that time, the unemployment rate was very nearly 30%. In order to address the impacts of the Depression, Kurt von Schleicher's government implemented economic reforms in 1932, which were initially retained by the new Nazi government. Former German Democratic Party member Hjalmar Schacht was appointed by Hitler to the positions of Minister of Economics in 1934 and President of the Reichsbank in 1933. In the first 2 years of the government alone, Nazi Germany's military spending surged from 1% to 10% of the country's GDP, quicker than any other state during a period of peace. By 1944, it had eventually risen to 75%. The Nazi leadership approved the first rearmament budget in June 1933, and it was a very ambitious plan. Schacht gave his approval for a military build-up budget of 35 billion Reichsmark to be spent over an 8-year period. In 1933, Germany's total national income was only 43 billion Reichsmark, meaning that the government's proposal went beyond simply raising military spending to include making military manufacturing the main driver of the country's economy. The cabinet had already decided to exempt the armed forces from the regular financial scrutiny procedures earlier in April. Hitler removed Germany from the League of Nations and the Geneva disarmament discussions in October 1933 because Germany's international treaty responsibilities would not permit such a large-scale rearmament. In order to reduce foreign competition in the German market and strengthen the country's balance of payments, a complex bureaucracy was established to control imports of both raw materials and completed commodities. The creation of synthetic substitutes for resources like oil and textiles was promoted by the Nazis. In 1933, the Nazi government signed a profit-sharing deal with IG Farben, guaranteeing them a 5% return on capital spent in their synthetic oil factory at Leuna, at a period of low petroleum prices and market glut. Over that amount, any profits would be given to the Reich. By 1936, Farben was sorry that agreement had been made, since the government had to receive the excess earnings that had been made by then. There was a huge turn around the economic influence of Germany, which led to an impact at which they became a strong company. The rise did not only have influence on the government, but had an impact on both men, women, and the youths. In order to advance Nazi ideology and create a cult of personality around Hitler, the dictatorship made great use of the media. The Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, was instrumental in this endeavor. In order to indoctrinate youth with Nazi principles and prepare them for future positions in the military and society, the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls were founded. To stifle criticism and impose compliance, the SS and the Gestapo were utilized as paramilitary groups and secret police. Persecuted groups, including as Jews and political opponents, were frequently detained in concentration camps. Hitler gave the German military's reconstruction and modernization first priority. This entailed creating new weaponry and military technologies, as well as growing the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The military grew after conscription was implemented in 1935. German soldiers were guaranteed to be disciplined and well-prepared by rigorous training programs. Germany invented and refined the Blitzkrieg, flash war, technique, which focused on employing soldiers, tanks, and planes to quickly defeat opponents with overwhelming force. The power also had a great grip for achieving territorial expansion and diplomatic maneuvers. Hitler disregarded the Locarno and Versailles treaties when he ordered the reoccupation of the demilitarized Rhineland in 1936. France and Britain offered little resistance to this audacious action. With little resistance from other European powers, Germany united the two German-speaking nations in 1938 when it conquered Austria as part of the Anschluss. Germany was able to acquire the Sudetenland part of Czechoslovakia by the Munich Agreement of 1938. Germany annexed the remaining portion of Czechoslovakia in 1939, therefore extending its borders. A non-aggression treaty between Germany and the Soviet Union, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939, featured a covert protocol that divided Eastern Europe into areas of influence. Because of this, Germany was able to attack Poland without worrying about Soviet intervention starting World War II. The regime's emphasis on infrastructure and rearmament produced notable industrial growth. Important sectors, including chemicals, steel, and automobiles, were given priority and given more space. Germany produced highly innovative tanks, planes, and submarines, among other military technological achievements. During this time, the V-2 rocket, the first long-range guided ballistic missile in history, was constructed. Hitler instituted a centralized totalitarian government that ruled over all facets of society. This made it possible to make decisions quickly and put policies into effect without the delays that come with democratic regimes. Hitler's magnetic leadership and persuasive speech-making inspired and united the German people, giving the country a feeling of direction and purpose. After World War I, Germany was a defeated and disheartened country. Under Hitler's leadership, it became a powerful military force. But this power came with a high price, both morally and practically speaking. The Second World War's devastation, widespread persecution, and suppression of liberties. Germany's economic recovery was largely fueled by the Marshall Plan, stable political conditions, and strong economic policies implemented between the late 1940s and the early 1950s. The long-term prosperity of West Germany was made possible by the economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s. Germany's 1990 reunification strengthened its standing as a significant political and economic force in both Europe and the wider world. Now Germany has been able to retain some of these glory in a great way. Germany's advanced industrial sector, powerful export market, and strong service industries have made it the largest economy in Europe and the fourth largest in the world. Electronics, machinery, chemicals, and automobiles are important industries. Germany is a major exporter of goods and is renowned for producing high-quality items, especially in the engineering and automotive industries. Worldwide recognition is possessed by brands such as Bosch, Siemens, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Volkswagen. Germany makes significant investments in R&D to keep its technological and innovative competitive advantage. It is a pioneer in industries like engineering, medicines, and renewable energy. Germany, the most powerful nation in the EU and a founding member, is crucial in determining the direction of EU policy and decision-making. Many people consider Berlin to be the EU's de facto capital. Germany is an active member of many international organizations, including the G7, NATO, and the United Nations. It promotes international collaboration, multilateralism, and sustainable development. Human rights, social justice, and the rule of law are highly valued in Germany's stable democratic system. Coalition governments and a dedication to European integration define its political environment. A falling birth rate and an aging population are two demographic concerns facing Germany. The job market, social security programs, and economic expansion are all impacted by this. The nation is still working to integrate immigrants and refugees into society while tackling concerns with inclusion, multiculturalism, and social cohesion. Germany is making its way through the shift to a green and digital economy. This entails being competitive, adjusting to technology advancements, and guaranteeing long-term prosperity. Germany is a major economic, technological, and diplomatic force in the world today. It is a leader in innovation and environmental sustainability, with a solid democratic base and a rich cultural legacy. Germany is thriving in spite of obstacles like integration and demographic changes, forging ahead with tenacity and creativity. That wraps up the video. What's your top interest in Germany's transformation? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and stay curious. Until next time.